The next briefing is a report on lustration law. Agnieska Piasecka, Open Dialog Foundation, support of lustration and judicial reform project coordinator. Maksym, Mankovskyi, representative of lustration committee. And Sergiy Ivanov, representative of Lustration Committee, and Alexander Kulikovsky, the deputy head of Ukrainian Lustration Association. Good afternoon to everyone. I am Agnieska Piasecka. I am the head of the project on support of lustration and judicial reform project, and also on support of the Provisional Commission on Auditing and Judges. I would like to present you the report which we have prepared and some of the materials. You have these materials. These are renewed recommendations as to the amendments to the law of Ukraine on cleaning the authorities, and we work with the Foundation Open Dialogue. We've been working with them from March this year, and the law should correspond more to the norms of European legislation, and I would like to tell you more about that, and then my esteemed colleagues will provide comments on the law and on amendments from the point of view of Lustration Committee and the advisor to the MP Suchovsky, who is with us today. You know that yesterday there were the official conclusions of the Venice Commission, and journalists were writing about them a lot. And I would like also to tell about what we think about these conclusions of the Venice Commission, and also more specific about our amendments. Talking more specifically, I would like to say that now the law on cleaning the authorities does not provide for a special body for checking. In the conclusions of the Venice Commission, there are mentioning of such a body. We need to provide for creation of an independent special institute of checking and auditing. A lot was mentioned in mass media, and I heard a lot that it is impossible to create such an independent body because the constitution of Ukraine is to be changed, amended. But that is not so. The lawyers checked that, and I can say that the opinion on the necessity to amend the constitution is not right. To create such an independent body, for that the decision of the President, Prime Minister is needed, and the law is to be amended. But the government has been created, and we have the National Agency on Civil Service, on the Security Service of Ukraine. And I've heard a lot that there are no money for creating a new governmental body in Ukraine, but I provided comments to coalition agreement 2 weeks ago, and in the coalition agreement they're talking about 6 new governmental agencies. If they have money for that bodies, that means that they can find money for this very important for Ukraine body or agency. As to the list of persons which are to be automatically dismissed from their positions, on the one hand, this could be provided, this could be perceived as the human rights violation and violation of the convention, European Convention on Human Rights, which stipulates that the person is not guilty before the court decision is made. But as to the former employees of the KGB, the state has the right to protect itself from people who are not loyal to the state. And the conclusion is made by our experts that contradicts the decision of the Venice Commission that is about the list of persons who are to be automatically dismissed, because now there is the war in the country, the conflict in the east of Ukraine, and there's no trust that all people in the state are loyal, because there has never been a verification of civil servants. I mean, looking at whether these people were cooperating with the intelligence, with the services, with the Soviet intelligence services, and as to judges, courts. The Venice Commission says that only the Council of Justice can make judges disciplinary responsible. But it's obvious that the realities of Ukraine have not been verified by Venice Commission. The Supreme Council of Justice depends a lot on the members of parliament, and that is why the judges can be made responsible, but only after the highest Council of Justice is reformed, and they can be made responsible for certain decisions according to the law on cleaning the authorities, on lustration. But the courts, people who did not cooperate with the former special services of the Soviet Union, they are not needed. But we need to mention that there should be individual responsibility provided for, not just taking the position for a year. If a person was holding a certain position under the Yanukovych administration, that is what is to be changed in the law. We believe this should be so. And what else I would like to say? The legal issues are not mathematics. It's not like there's no possibility for negotiations. The illustration should be done just according to Resolution 1096, because the resolution itself is not very specific. And in Poland, for example, all the MPs checked in accordance with lustration law, because there was a decision of European Court on Human Rights that provided for these positions to.
However, this is not so to the end, because in Ukraine the list of MPs is not published to the end, and some of the MPs have been elected according to non-open lists. So our recommendation is that MPs and other elected offices are checked by the lustration law or checked from another point of view. But of course, really no one now knows how the president of Ukraine will react to the decision of the Venetian Commission and what will be the result of negotiations that are taking place now in this country. But from our point of view, we can clearly say that the decision of the Venetian Commission is not mathematics. You can try to defend yourself. However, if the legislation is being drafted, you have to inspect, to check it against the decisions of European Union, against the legal issues of European Union from the very start, from the point when you start to develop the legislation. And if there's a decision that the law can violate human rights, then you have to protect yourself with the decisions of lawyers who work with the European Union. Then they will be able to tell you about a specific issue of every decision that does not meet the norms of European legislation. And they can be found in every law. In the end, I want to say one thing. It is very important that every person who wants to draft a new law checks this law against other legislative acts that may be that pertain to the same issues, as even from the very start of the drafting of the Lustration law, it was more or less in a judicial conflict with the law on the inspection of judges. And you have to check this, how these two laws can be changed so there's no judicial conflict between them. From our point of view, this is all. And I want to tell you that lustration is a very important issue in Ukraine. We will support this process as much as we can. Thank you very much. And I want to pass the floor to my esteemed colleagues. Good afternoon. I thank Agnieska Piasecka, who represents the Open Dialog Foundation, to Lyudmila Piasecka, who have monitored the lustration process taking place in Ukraine now. We will consider their conclusions. We are grateful that they are concerned with the processes that are taking place in Ukraine now, especially as they are not citizens of Ukraine, but they are concerned very much, more than many citizens. We recognize that the laws are not ideal, that we have to improve them, but regrettably many people in Ukraine who are against the law, they are not against some aspects, they are against lustration as such, and they want to preserve the old system. While this law changes the system as such, and these people have applied to change the law, and they initiated the change of this law. The Venetian Commission is now considering this issue. We want to see their conclusions. We want to analyze them. We will heed the advice from our European friends, but we would emphasize that Ukraine has not changed. We are ready to consider the proposals by our European colleagues, but Ukraine is still lagging behind in many aspects. The Europeans have been living in democratic conditions for quite some time, but I would like to remind you of the courts in Europe. And say what the problems are. We go to the court and we win cases there. But in Ukraine, the court system is not an independent branch of the power. And, they don't want to change. As my colleague has aptly said, my lawyer colleague, they still want to be at your service bodies. They want to serve the powers that be, and they don't want to purify themselves. They invent any prerequisites and reasons to stay the same. There's an application to the Constitutional Court who are ready to prolong the rule of Mr. Yanukovych, who does not want to change as well. So we are thankful for recommendations and for the monitoring, but I want to remind you that there are problems. We will be trying to solve it. I don't want to speak about specific clauses. We've talked quite a lot about this. I'm in the public Council on Lustration attached to the Ministry of Justice. We are an independent body created according to the law on the purification of the powers. So for us, the main business now is the control over the implementation of this law. We know that many ministries and departments have dismissed many people during the first wave of lustration, but at the moment we have a lot of statements about and complaints that people try to avoid lustration. We are looking into these issues, and we will do everything possible so that the law adopted on the 16th of October is implemented. If there are changes, we will look into these changes and we'll talk about this. But the main thing is that the law has to be performed, fulfilled, and people who have to be dismissed have to be removed in the process of lustration. Thank you very much. Good afternoon. Well, I'm Alexander Kulikovsky, deputy head of the public organization All Ukrainian Lustration. I'm the co-author of 4570 draft law from the political party Svoboda. I want to tell you that the law on the purification of power, that was a compromise option that was approved. It does require some changes because we see that those things that we worked out and what we want to, we have been wanting to conduct lustration in Ukraine for quite some time, and it is not instrumental in this. The 4570 draft law filed by Svoboda MPs, Technibok and Mankovskyi, and public activists, in particular Viktor Smoley, was criticized, and they said that it was too radical. But the illustration in the first turn is purification, and if there's a disease in the state system, then it should be cured, and sometimes it does require surgical intrusion, interference. So this law was like a surgical interference, because we were in favor not only of purification of public service, but we also stipulated in our law the category of people who want to engage in elected positions. They should be lustrated. If this law were adopted, this would be a certain guarantee and impossibility of going into the parliament of the so-called opposition bloc that was working within the criminal system of Mr. Yanukovych. But now we have to listen to them and take them into account. Of course, this makes the society very indignant. For instance, Mr. Ivanov, who would be lustrated in the first term, he now tries to cancel this law. So we will, of course, file our recommendations for this compromise draft law that was adopted, so that lustration is taking place in a stricter way. Now we see in many law enforcement bodies the lustration is selective, and people who have to be fired remain, and those whom they don't like retain their positions. We see this in General Prosecutor's Office and in our police, and we have the situation when the head of the department personally decides who stays and who goes. When we provide recommendations, they are being ignored. So in our draft law, we had it that all the police system and law enforcement system has to be replaced, like they did it in Georgia, not only about the top officials and managers, but the entire personnel of law enforcement bodies. Because what we saw during Maidan, when all the special forces from Berkut, there were 500 people there who beat people on Maidan. But I think that they all should be arrested according to the Article 320, even because they were present there, even if they did not use force. But some public activists and some politicians did not want to see this draft law enacted. Well, we have what we have, but we will file our amendments to the law, and I think that lustration in Ukraine will be held. I think that lustration cannot be limited in time. This should be a constant process. If you want to apply for a state official position or an MP, you have to go through some check process, like if you want to have firearms. Only in this way we can put a barrier against some people going into offices who are connected to corruption or other negative schemes. That's why we will provide our recommendations and will insist on including them into this draft law. Thank you.
Доброго дня.
Good afternoon. Sergiy Ivanov, the member of the Public Lustration Committee. My colleagues have already told you a lot about the problems that we are facing at the stage of the activities, legal activities, in the context of the law on lustration. I would like to explain to the colleagues what's happening in reality. This is the total sabotage of the law on lustration, which is inspired by people who personify Yanukovych's regime. First of all, that is Kivalov, the person who for many years was making the law enforcement system of Ukraine corrupt. And he was the unofficial curator of all the judges, all the sort of expert comments which are expressed by judges, even such judges as the chairman of the Council of Judges, that is the pattern which was pulled into her brain by Portnov, Kivalov, and Medvedchuk, three famous, in inverted commas, lawyers of Ukraine. Just look at the comments of these people. I mean Ukrainian only. Our Western colleagues and experts, they provide the constructive proposals, but listen to what these local critics are saying. First of all, they're saying, I do not know how they can be called lawyers. I have a suspicion that they have not graduated from any law departments. I would give every one of them a textbook. You can send the textbooks to the Constitutional Court and to the Supreme Court because people do not understand what's happening in reality. This is not lustration. This is not legal responsibility. There's a definition of legal responsibility from the times of Roman law, that this is a consequence of executing some publicly dangerous action. And when they comment, when they say what Medvedchuk, Kivalova, Portnov told them, they say that we are made responsible for something. And as my colleague mentioned, lustration is not making someone responsible. This is more like the criteria when the person is employed. It's like when you want to get the firearms, you need to present certain certificates. If you do not have a driver's license, you cannot drive a bus, or you cannot work as a taxi driver. All the challenges and the objective reality puts all these requirements. We understand that people who worked in the system of Yanukovych, who were holding the positions of the some leading senior positions, just the clerks who were not organizing any persecutions of the activists of Euromaidan and who were not infiltrated into the system of public administration of Ukraine, who are not the agents of KGB. Nothing threatens them. All these questions are to the heads, but the heads of any state agency in Ukraine, especially those who are there from the times of Yanukovych, they are corrupt and they work according to the schemes that they used to. I was for creating an independent body which would be able to introduce lustration, to implement lustration, but I understand that our state cannot afford it. Instead of the Ministry of States, I would set up this body, but it looks like the Ministry of States is so important. But let lustration wait. And another recommendation that the representatives of the Foundation Open Dialogue give us is to prolong the term of checking. They suggest to prolong it, to extend it from 4 to 6 months, but that's impossible. You can understand that in 4 or 6 months in this country, with the existing paradigm of judicial power, law enforcement bodies, you can buy anyone and anything. So I believe that if there are changes, then the checking should be shortened. It should take 2 or 3 hours. If you have to confirm your assets, it may take a week or a couple of weeks. So, and also, let's be frank, our colleagues from Poland, from Latvia, with who I talked, from Czech Republic, from Georgia, they were listening to the requirements and recommendations of such institutions as the Venice Commission, but you understand, Now we have Grad systems, artillery, and Russian agents. They act on the territory of Ukraine, but not on the territory of Italy. And I don't think they are faced with the threats that our country is facing. So unfortunately, I cannot support these proposals completely, the proposals of our colleagues. We will look at the opinion of Venice Commission, even though I saw what it will be, and what it will probably not satisfy us. But I believe that our society, our activists, our journalists have to get consolidated, and as this conclusion of the Foundation of Open Dialogue says, this law is executing an important scaring role, preventive role. Despite the fact that these mechanisms are not perfect, but they have to work. Though we can feel a big opposition and a big sabotage. And the fact that little more than 350 persons are lustrated is the confirmation of that. Thank you for attention. I would like to thank the colleagues, the foundation that invited us and that gave us the proposals. We'll take them into account. But first of all, I would like to request you to correlate the level of threats that we are faced with. Any questions, dear colleagues?
I have a question of a more philosophical nature. Don't you think that rather soon the notion lustration, which we've been regarding as panacea for quite some time, can be discredited to such an extent by how it is being implemented that we will have to look for a new word for it because people will stop believing in it? And now, what shall we do if you say that it's not going the way we would like to see this? What should we do so that this process brings the results? Sorry for coming back to the mic so soon, but I think that because we are embarked on the way of European integration and we share European values, we shall do this in a civilized manner. Of course, we remember very well what was happening here just a year ago, and we understand and we remember that no one is insured against the repetition of this if the authorities ignore the requirements and demands of the people and of objective reality. But I think that we shall fruitfully work with the MPs because there are quite a lot of honest people among those who've been elected, and this is the difference compared to the previous convocation, and the top officials who will be about whom we will be sure about protection and red tape and sabotage. You know, if you are, and even if it is not intentional, if you are prosecutor general, then you cannot protract. We will demand from our MPs, and we have certain support in different factions, we will demand the dismissal of those officials who are controlled by the parliament, because there's no other way out. I tell you even today that the prosecutor general should be dismissed. He is not only violating openly the norms of legislation, hiring people who should be lustrated, like his first deputy, Gerasimyuk, who was deputy of Minister of Justice Lavrinovich, like the prosecutor of the city of Kiev, who is now allegedly knitting the protection for all of us. Besides, he does publicly state that he does not like this law. But forgive me, who are you, Mr. Yarema? There is a law signed by the president. Please either fulfill it or go away from your, or leave your position. I want to support my colleague. What's going on with illustration, or rather what is not going on, we can, of course, motivate some radical processes in the state, and we see the last recent examples of storming regional councils, and of course the security service who calls these mini uprisings people's republics, but this is an indication of why those regional councils were assaulted, because there's no lustration in locations. And we have hundreds of phone calls every day without complaints against police and prosecutor's office. Nothing has changed in the country. And those stormings of regional councils are the signs for the new authorities. What Yanukovych has not seen during events in Vradiivka has led to the revolution. But then the people were more patient, and our authorities should think about the fact that there is a lot of arms here that are being transported from the anti-terrorist operation zone to here. And if the authorities don't understand that if they do not adopt some quick decisions about lustration, the radical intentions and moods will manifest themselves more and more and will lead to very regretful events in the state. And the events, the separatist events in the East, and I will be silent about Crimea. So these events are the after effects of not adopting the lustration law for some time, because, then when the first 4570 draft law was voted for by 146 or 176 MPs, then all the heads of security service and militia would be dismissed, but they stayed in their offices and they were inviting and letting separatists in and giving out arms to, in fact, Russian occupants. If we do not see to it in the law that elected officials are illustrated as well, then look what we have. When we liberate a town, then people who were elected and led to those bloody events in the East come back to power, and we cannot dismiss them. So I insist that the authorities heed the demands of the people, because the effects of not listening may be very radical. I'm interested in the question. At the moment, there's an intensive and I think too tense and rather theatralized fight against the Yarema, against the background of the total cover of the work of Mr. Avakov. So this is the system of Stalinist and Roman right. Prosecutors are just controllers of police, and we fight against this controlling part, and we have not heard anything about police. Can you explain this phenomenon to us?
In fact, I wouldn't compare, I wouldn't talk about this. The Stalin definitions and Roman law, what's that? That's the hybrid. You have said some nonsense, sorry. But what's happening to the general prosecutor is what he deserves. I don't know what's happening with Mr. Avakov and who defends him, because our requirements are similar to Yarema, to Avakov, to Nalivaychenko, but Avakov doesn't have the person of Lavrinovich as a first deputy. Avakov is not trying to appoint. It's despite the fact that I am not communicating to him because we had a serious conflict with him. And an hour before, I gave a very bad comment to Channel 5 about Mr. Avakov, so that you do not suspect anything. The General Prosecutor's Office, unfortunately, and the many experts agree to that, those who were not just observing it from the aside, but those who were integrated into the system. Because I worked in the prosecutor's office till 2008. I know if you give an order, the investigators will do everything possible, and in 3 months, the case on the shooting of Maidan will be investigated, disclosed. And of course, there are more complicated criminal cases, and I can tell you as the lawyer, as to the prosecutor's office, not a single judicial sentence like in Kharkiv, the spies were deprived of freedom for 3 years, and he stayed in detention facility for 1.5 years. That's all happening with the support of prosecutor's office. Unblocking the accounts. Where was the prosecutor? I mean Arbuzov's accounts. The liberation of Sadovnik, who's responsible for that? Closing the criminal case against Bakulin, who stole almost quarter of the annual budget of Ukraine. Maybe yes, maybe too much attention is concentrated on Yarema because the expectations of this society are very high after Maidan. And Yarema, after he has become the general prosecutor, he is now in the focus of these expectations. Why he's not working? Because there's no reform of General Prosecutor's Office. There's total corruption in the General Prosecutor's Office. The Pshonka schemes are working. Just ask what Mr. Geller, how is Mr. Geller? Same schemes are still in place. You as a blogger, you probably need to deepen into that, talk to MPs, talk to people, and then you will understand why Yarema is criticized so much. Yarema, I don't care what his name is, Yarema, Pshonka, Potibenka, I hope he's still alive. Anyone, the general prosecutor who's in Ukraine does not work, and I do not care what his name is. If Yarema is dismissed and in 2 months I see that the next general prosecutor will not work, I will do the same to him as what I do to Yarema. Any other questions? If not, then we would like to thank our guests and thank all our journalists.